Hey, hello, good morning, good afternoon. How are you? That's delicious. Welcome to Inside the Studio. I'm your host, Chris Rini. Today, I'd like to debut a new feature, something which I have not prepared much for, but was struck by inspiration. As many of you know, I am illustrating a book about MMA. It's a retrospective of close to all of the exciting fights, title defenses, and upsets, and greatest fights, greatest performances. And it's also an artistic look at MMA because it's the iconic poses of many sports already exist, like the Babe Ruth home run swing, you know, the Jordan flying through the air, the dunk. Um, I guess I like to sell anyway. You get what I'm going with. For that kind of like celebration war cry, Anderson Silva, a front kick in Vitor Belfort, and I feel like for MMA, those are still tied to an individual because the sport is so crazy young. Anyway, forgive me for rambling. I'm illustrating a book to show what happens in a fight, the way the human body moves, the new iconic things that are going to be part of the sport, the way like a tackle is to football. That's what a jab is going to be, or the overhand right. Anyway, let's get on with it. It's enough of that. Here we have what was once called the Year in Fighting. I will be debuting a new name as soon as I register the business and buy URLs and all that stuff. To some of you who have followed me, it will not be a surprise. And to new people, you'll be like, wow, that's a really good idea. Welcome to page 1 of the new book. By the way, my patrons will already have a picture you can zoom in on. And I made that available to the public as well. Patreon.com/Chris Rini. So let's get started. I don't think I'm going to hold this thing up the whole time. Take a screenshot or, go be a patron. Go to the Patreon page later. It's all free. Anyway, we'll start here with Paige Van Zant versus, oh my God, I forgot Rachel Ostovich. I wanted to, I put in like a lot of, geography. I put the octagon mat in and I put the background of the crowd, which is usually all black. Is the way I like to reduce things. I lit them from the top. You see some yellow highlights there. They're not amazing, but I'm always struck by how the UFC lights their fights. They're from straight down, and it creates a kind of unique shadow set. A lot of shiny backs and foreheads, and a lot of shadow downcast eyes. From an artist point of view, I actually really enjoy it. I think it provides a unique lighting structure that is actually simultaneously very uniform. So that's something I occasionally highlight in the artwork, and sometimes it's something I purposely disregard. I edited out Paige Van Zant and Rachel Ostovich's faces from this image because so much was made of their looks, and they're attractive women, but they're also good fighters. Neither of them are fighters whose appearance has really over performances. Some people will say that about Paige, but honestly, like, she's been in a lot of great fights, and the fight with Rose Namajunas is like a fantastic fight. It's a beatdown, but it's also like, I don't know, if two guys were doing exactly that, it'd be it'd be interesting to see how that was received, what kind of accolades that would have in the long run. Anyway, so I edited out their faces, and I decided to get really stylized about the way I was portraying their bodies. I, you know, I don't readily embrace realism. That's not a part of my my like partially my skill set, but it's not within my grasp. I did a bit of I would go to the Met when I was in college and copy sculptures, and I saw like, wow, just one semester, and like those skills really start to manifest. Um, no, I'd like to come up with my own language, something that's kind of unmistakably my work, and I know that everyone has their way of manifesting their individuality. I think my line work, that's what I've been focusing on. So it kind of works hand in hand for the way I am. Anyway, next up, we have Donald Cerrone versus Alex Hernandez. I was at this fight at the Barclays, and I've had the misfortune at being at a couple UFC events that were not as dynamic. Definitely, the UFC on ESPN was it was awesome. I had a really good time, really good fights, and it was cool to. It was probably the first time I'd ever been to a show where, like, the crowd totally loved this one fighter and kind of popped for him before he even started fighting. And Cerrone is, that was a cool experience just to be like, oh, hey, a lot of people here for Cerrone. I don't know if I've ever been to a fight where there was a guy on the main card, or what, Cerrone, I think the co-main, or maybe even third. Anyway, they went nuts for him. I did this piece to kind of highlight the intercepting knees. I thought that was the coolest. The old man showing his tricks to the young kid who's just like rushing in, and Hernandez has got his hands down. He's swinging a big right, and Cerrone's killing his momentum. You'll see that this is cropped pretty heavily, below the calves, below the ankle for Cerrone, and I'm really kind of wrapping my head around how am I going to fit these two grown men in a 3-inch by 3-inch square. So when I realized that, I moved on to the next drawing, which is Jose Aldo versus Renato Moicano. Big inspirational fight. That was really awesome. Nice to see the crowd go nuts for him. It was nice to see the MMA community really rally around this idea of Aldo, still being, the head of the pack, even if he can't, couldn't take out Max Holloway. So I highlighted the body shot. I really exaggerated Moicano's, like looks like a tree falling over, and Aldo is much more stocky and like solid and planted. Really, and then I was like, okay, you could see that I kind of put those highlights on Aldo for the top down lighting, and geez, I just wanted to have some. I like Moicano's body. I actually thought about turning that into a painting and editing out Aldo, and basically completing Moicano's body. So if you see that one day, you'll be like, see that? Patrons, they know about that shit like long before it happens. Like it took him like 3 years to make that painting, but he did, and he said he was gonna make it. And color is not my strong suit. So as you can see, we were like doing slightly more realistic. Move on to Cerrone, and I was like, all right, let me just play around with really obvious, what's the word, complementary colors, these oranges, peaches, and then all the blue, the sky blue, and kind of a royal blue or navy blue for the shorts. See how that works. And then I decided that was a little too crazy, or not too crazy. Like, I got to fill up a whole page. I got to make this look like a piece of artwork as well as this. So I was like, oh, how about a more neutral background, like this cool gray. I came up with this Charles Oliveira. Oh man, what's his name? Tamer. Daniel Tamer? David Tamer? Either way. No, I'm allowed to make that mistake because the tamers, if I'm correct, fight at feather and light, and Oliveira fights at feather and light. So now I just started having a lot more fun, editing out Tamer's arm altogether, just having his hand hanging out there because I want to make sure that this hard right angle and is going to make Oliveira stand out. Playing around with different shadow combinations, like all right, I'll go with green and brown, and more abstract shapes instead of like rendering everything. And I'm starting to feel good. And there's this weird thing where you're like, well, if it's a less pivotal fight, if it's not Askren versus Masvidal, then I can get a little more experimental in my representation, which is a real interesting way to put value on stuff like Masvidal, because I definitely went through that, like, oh, it's Masvidal versus Askren. I feel a lot of pressure to make this not only a good piece of artwork but a exceptional, um, like the execution has to mirror the effort put forth in the fight. And that also came through in when I did Adesanya versus Gastelum. And I don't know if that's really the right move sometimes. But listen, I've been going on for like almost 12 minutes. Thank you so much. I see one of my homies is out there watching. Appreciate you. If you would like to see a larger megabyte piece of the page, patreon.com/Chris Rini. I should have put the link in the description. I will do that now. There's only one tier. It's pay what you want. I do what I want. I've been thinking about coming up with a secondary tier for people who just straight up are like, yo, I'll finance this book. I'll make it happen. And then I want a copy for free at the end of the year. So I'm coming up with a way to do that. There are people who just want to buy a book at the end of the year. And then there's people who are like, want to see how it comes together, all the sketches, the drawings, and then just they be like, I gave you, $10 or more, $20 a month for a whole year. I shouldn't have to buy a book. And I think you're right. If you want to put forth that kind of help, I got to come up with a way to give you a book. So that's what's coming next. Take care of yourself. I'll talk to you next week.